control the mind is an eternal question. Arjuna tells Lord Krishna, it is easier to control the wind than the mind. Krishna agrees with him and tells him, Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. It is very true that it is very difficult to control the mind, but it is not impossible. It can be controlled through abhyasa and vairagya. The same two ideas we find in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali also. Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tannirodhaha. Vairagya is the negative aspect of sadhana and abhyasa is the positive aspect. We try to detach the mind from the things of the world which are always attracting us, our minds towards them. After withdrawing the mind from them, we have to fix the mind on something which will be very useful to us, which will ultimately lead us to perfection, and that is done by abhyasa, repeatedly trying to fix the mind on the Atman or Paramatman. Now this basic idea has been expanded into a regular science of controlling the mind by Patanjali. After giving a lot of preliminary information, Patanjali takes up a detailed exposition of the 8 steps. That is why Patanjali's yoga system is called Ashtanga Yoga. Yama, Niyama, Asana. These are the first 3 steps. We have already gone through them. The 4th step is called Pranayama. Pranasya ayamaha, that is how it is defined. It is lengthening, stretching the prana. Prana or pranic energy, we can say, is the subtle nervous energy which is pervading the whole body and is also connected with the mind. In our day-to-day life, we find that the mind and the breathing or breathing system, they are closely connected. Suppose the mind is agitated, then the breathing becomes short and quick. On the other hand, if the mind is very calm and quiet, as it sometimes happens when we are enjoying the beauties of nature, breathing becomes very slow and rhythmic. So here is the secret. Breathing and mind are connected. Therefore, by controlling the breathing system, is it not possible to control the mind? Patanjali says yes. And it is a regular science and called pranayama, and it has been developed into a very complicated system by the works on Hatha Yoga, like Hatha Yoga Pradipika and Gheranda Samhita. There are several aspects of this pranayama. The very first aspect of pranayama is called Nadi Shuddhi, purifying the nadis or the tubular structures in the body through which the pranic energy flows. And it is normally done by taking the breath through the left nostril and then breathing it out through the right, and again breathing in through the right, and breathing out through the left. So that is one cycle. And this Nadi Shuddhi has to be practiced probably for 15 days or 1 month. Even Bhagavan Shankaracharya refers to it in his commentary on the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So Nadi Shuddhi is practically the first step or first exercise. Then comes the regular pranayama, Rechaka, Kumbhaka, Puraka and so on. So first of all we have to breathe in through the left nostril, then hold the breath for some time, breathe out through the right nostril and then reverse the process. But for this there is a time proportion. 16 seconds, 64 seconds, 32 seconds, that is the standard practice, but it is very difficult to do it in the very beginning itself. 16 seconds inhalation, 64 seconds retention of the breath, and for 32 seconds breathing it out. So this has to be practiced for a long time, and things have to be increased gradually. And in one particular sutra, Patanjali refers to all these aspects very briefly, and the commentators give a lot of information expounding the details given there. Bahya abhyantara stambha vrittihi deshakala sankhyabihi paridrishto dirgha sukshmaha. According to Yoga Shastra, we have 3 passages in the region of the backbone, Ida, Pingala and Sushumna. Sushumna Nadi is in the center, Ida is on the left, Pingala is on the right. So normally the pranic energy is going through either Ida or Pingala. It has to be withdrawn from these two and made to pass through Sushumna. This is done by practicing pranayama and slowly getting control over that. Here in this sutra, certain calculations have been referred to. Desha, Kala and Sankhya. Desha means the space. Actually, when we are breathing out, the air is pushed out up to a particular distance. In the beginning it may be just 4 inches. When I breathe out, up to 4 inches it goes forcibly. Afterwards it gets distributed. And gradually by practice this distance can be increased. Ultimately it can be 12 inches. That is about desha or space. Then kala is the duration of time. First it may be 8 seconds, and then 32 seconds and 16 seconds, then 12 and so on. Gradually it can be increased to 16, 64 and 32. These things should be done under the guidance of a teacher and should be done very gradually. First of all, you start with the lower figures. Once the pranayama settles down there, then increase the time duration a little more, and ultimately it should reach this proportion, 16 seconds, 64 seconds and 32 seconds. That is kala. The third one is sankhya, number. One may probably start with 4 pranayamas in the morning and 4 in the evening, gradually make it 6, 8 and so on. So, certain numbers and limits are given by the Hatha Yogic scriptures about desha and kala and sankhya. Once this is attained, that is, the pranayama is practiced according to this, and we practically come to the ultimate limit or summit as far as desha, kala and sankhya are concerned, then prana becomes dirgha sukshmaha. It becomes very fine and very subtle. The commentators give the example of a lump of cotton. A lump of cotton is very heavy, but if the same cotton is spread out gradually, it can be thinned out almost like a muslin cloth. So in the same way, pranayama makes the pranic energy very fine and thin and subtle. In that condition, pranic energy pervades the whole body in a uniform manner. Once that is attained, automatically the physical health also improves and mind also comes under control more easily and is at peace. Bahya abhyantara vishaya anapekshi chaturthaha. Finally, the most important aspect of pranayama, kumbhaka, retention of the breath. In the beginning it may be done in the order of puraka, kumbhaka, rechaka and so on. Later on it may be just done suddenly. Straight away take the breath and stop it. But that is at a final stage. The commentators say the exercises have to be gone through gradually, and only later on, when you have got sufficient control over your breath, you are able to keep the air breathing under control through kumbhaka. Once you are able to achieve perfection in pranayama, what are the results? Prakashasya tataha kshiyate prakasha avaranam. This is a very important part of sadhana which helps us if we practice pranayama. Tataha kshiyate prakasha avaranam. Prakasha means light. Light of the Atman. Yes, light of the Atman is covered over by tamoguna in the mind. Gradually, by practicing pranayama, tamoguna becomes less and less, and Atman, we are able to feel the presence of the Atman more and more. Of course, one result is very obvious. If you are able to control the breath through pranayama, automatically we feel a lot of peace, and the mind also becomes steady. Dharana yogyata manasaha. As a result of this, mind becomes fit for dharana. Dharana, dhyana and samadhi are the last three stages of controlling the mind. Before that dharana comes pratyahara. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. This is the fifth step. Pratyaharanam. The mind is going out towards the objects of senses, catch hold of it and bring it back. So that is called pratyahara. Swaswa vishaya asamprayoge chitta swarupa anukaraha iva indriyanam pratyaharaha. So this is the definition. The five sense organs are going out towards their objects. Suppose they are prevented from doing so, they come back and they practically merge in the mind. The functioning of the indriyas becomes similar to the functioning of the mind. Vishayeshu prasaktani indriyani munishvaraha samahritya nigrihnati pratyaharastu sasmritaha. Or to put it in a simple language, we close the eyes and Imagine that we are withdrawing the mind into ourselves and trying to concentrate it in the region of the heart. Indriyanam vicharatam vishayeshu svabhavatah balad akarshanaat yesham pratyaharasya uchyate. So without effort we cannot achieve concentration of mind. So the very first process or the very first act in the process of controlling the mind is withdrawing the mind from the sense objects which are outside. And all the scriptures give us a warning. The most important thing in the practice of yoga is controlling these organs. Indriya jaya. Anirjita indriya gramam yastu dhyanaparo bhavet mudhatmananchatam vidyat dhyanancha asya na siddhyati. So, primarily, we should attempt to control the sense organs, especially the jnanendriyas. If the jnanendriyas are controlled, mind also can be controlled, then pratyahara, dharana and so on become more easy. So up to this point, these 5 steps are generally called as bahirangas. They are external aspects of the Ashtanga Yoga. Then comes the antaranga, the internal aspects, the 3 steps of dharana, dhyana, resulting in samadhi. Desha bandhaha chittasya dharana. Yamadi gunayuktasya manasaha sthitihi atmani dharana iti uchyate sabhihi yogashastra visharadaihi. नाभिचक्रे हृदयपुण्डरीके मूर्ध्नि ज्योतिषि नासिकाग्रे जिह्वाग्रे इत्येवमादिषु देशेषु बाह्ये वा विषये चित्तस्य वृत्तिमात्रेण बन्धः इति धारणा. As I have pointed out earlier, without the basic commentary, bhashya, it is very difficult to understand these sutras. So the famous bhashya for Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is by Vyasa. It's called Vyasa Bhashya. Now desha means a particular point within our body on which the mind has to be concentrated. Desha bandha chittasya dharana. If we catch hold of the mind, after withdrawing it from the outside objects, fix it within our own body in certain points which are recommended by the Shastras or the scriptures, then it is called as dharana. Which are the places? It may be Nabhi Chakra, or it may be Hridaya Pundarika, the heart, region of the heart, or on the top of the head, or the eyes and so on, or the tip of the nose. Well, later on, he gives the different kinds of results or powers that are developed as a result of concentration on these various points in our body. On the whole, dharana simply means fixing the mind upon the object of concentration. As far as we are concerned, as sadhakas, we have to concentrate the mind on the Atman or Paramatman in the region of the heart, Hridaya Pundarika. Imagine that there is a lotus in the region of the heart, generally called Anahata Chakra, with 12 petals, lotus, red in color. On that the Ishta Devata is sitting. Bring the mind to that and fix it upon that. But the point is, dharana is very short-lived. We draw the mind, fix it upon the object, and after a few seconds, again it runs away. Again we bring it back. That is why it is called abhyasa. Repeated practice to fix the mind on the object of concentration, that is called abhyasa. Now when we practice this for a long time, slowly dharana matures into dhyana. So dhyana is continuous thinking, continuous meditation. In the Upanishads it is called nididhyasana. The word nididhyasana used by Advaita Vedanta and the word dhyana used by Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, they are practically the same. Tasmin deshe dhyaya alambanasya pratyayikatanata sadrishaha pravahaha pratyayantarena aparamrishtaha dhyanam. Patanjali's definition is tatra pratyayikatanata dhyanam. Tatra, there, on that point of meditation, say the region of the heart. Pratyaya means mental wave. It must be ekatanata, continuous, without breaks. That is called dhyana. The mind is flowing in the form of waves, let us say. Normally there are hundreds of waves, each wave containing a different object altogether. If we just observe our own mind, we see within 5 minutes it thinks of 108 things. So that is the nature of the mind. So pratyaya, or the wave of the mind, should be ekatana, the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, the fourth wave. Every wave must have the same object for its concentration. Then it becomes dhyana. Tasmin deshe dhyaya alambanasya pratyay ekatanata sadrishaha pravahaha pratyayantarena aparamrishtaha. No other thought wave should come. There must be a single thought wave running continuously without being disturbed by other thought waves. If we reach that state, it is called dhyana. So when we go on practicing, dharana becomes dhyana. Even in the process of dhyana, we may be attaining it for short periods. Maybe for 2 to 3 minutes continuously, the mind may be resting on the Ishtadevata. And this may gradually increase. One example can make it clear. Suppose there is a blackboard here, and I take a piece of chalk and then put dots. 1 dot here, 1 dot there, 1 dot there. So in the beginning these dots are all spread out. Each dot represents concentration. The space between dots represents distraction. So one moment of concentration, maybe 15, 20 moments of distraction. Again the mind comes back. We go on practicing to control the mind. So this is the state of dharana. Then gradually these dots come nearer and nearer. By repeated practice, the moments of concentration become more, moments of distraction become less. The space between the dots becomes less and less. When the dots join together, and when it becomes a dotted line, we can call it as dhyana. There is no break. But still, there is something there which is not absolute or completely concentrated. So that is called dhyana. In this dhyana, state of dhyana, though there is continuity of thought, there is also something which is obstructing this continuous flow of the thought. What is that? That is called as triputi. I am conscious of myself. I am meditating on such and such an object. This is technically called triputi, the group of three. There is a consciousness of myself, there is a consciousness of the process of concentration, there is also the consciousness of the object of concentration. To that extent, though concentration is there, it is not continuous, absolute, perfect. So that is dhyana. Now this dhyana gradually ripens into samadhi. Tadeva arthamatra nirbhasam swarupa shunyam iva samadhihi. Now artha means object of concentration, object of meditation. Tadeva, the very process of dhyana, when it ripens into this state where arthamatra nirbhasa, only the object of concentration is before the mind's eye, swarupa shunyam iva, one practically forgets himself, then it is called samadhi. To put it in a plain, simple language, in dhyana, I am concentrating on such and such an object, Triputi is there. But here in samadhi, I is forgotten, am concentrating is forgotten, only the object of concentration is shining brilliantly before the mind's eye. Sometimes it happens even in our day-to-day life. You may be listening to some music or looking at the beautiful sunrise. For a few moments, seconds, we forget ourselves. When somebody may come and even call us by name, we are not aware of that. When they come and touch us on the back, pat us on the back, then we suddenly become aware of that. So this type of concentration, when it becomes very deep, it is called as samadhi. Dhyanam eva dhyaya akara nirbhasam pratyayatmakena swarupena shunyam iva yada bhavati dhyaya svabhava aveshat tada samadhi iti uchyate. Of course, some commentators give a calculation from pranayama to pratyahara and so on. According to that calculation, if the concentration is complete, absolute, for at least 20 minutes, then it can be called a samadhi. Once, one of the young men who was coming to the ashrama was very much interested in concentration. He was talking to Yatishwaraji Maharaj. He put him a question directly. Swamiji, have you experienced samadhi? He said, yes. Very rarely he would give out his internal realizations, but it just happened because that gentleman himself told me about it. He had put the question directly and he had confessed that he had experienced it. So, ultimately the last step is samadhi, perfect concentration on the object of meditation. If that object of meditation is the Atman or a Paramatman, automatically it results in moksha or kaivalya. But Patanjali, being a man of science of the mind, he says that concentration can be practiced on anything. It may be an external object, it may be an internal object or situation. And there are certain results which come out of that. Now he uses a technical term called samyama. Dharana, dhyana and samadhi. The three steps put together technically are called samyama. But one has to notice that dharana and dhyana and samadhi, all the three must have one and the same object. You first fix your mind upon a particular object, dharana, that ripens into dhyana, then into samadhi. So once a person is able to get samyama, dharana, dhyana and samadhi, on any object for instance, the mind is completely under his control now. Now, after this, Patanjali gives us a long list of siddhis which the yogi attains through samyama. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi put together is called samyama. If you practice samyama on such and such things, you will get such and such powers. A long list of powers is there. Some of them I can keep before you. Shabdartha pratyayanam itaretar adhyasat sankaraha tat prayubhaga samyamat sarvabhuta ruta jnanam. Well, we need not go into the details. The sutra simply means if you practice samyama upon sound, somebody is speaking something. There is a person who is speaking, there is the organ which is speaking, and there are words which are spoken, and the words mean something. So they're all different from one another. You feel as if they are all one. If the yogi is able to practice samyama upon every one of these aspects separately, then he will be able to get the siddhi or the power called sarvabhuta ruta jnana. He is able to understand the meaning of every kind of sound. Or to put it in a simpler language, the yogi will be able to understand the speech of ants, the speech of dogs, the speech of animals, or any other being for that matter. So that power to understand what exactly that particular speech means or sound means comes because of this type of samyama. Samskara sakshatkaranat purvajati jnanam. Now, the yogi observes certain people and also observes his own mind. He comes to know about the samskaras. There are certain tendencies. X and Y and Z, they have got certain tendencies. I also have certain tendencies. By practicing samyama on these tendencies, he will be able to get purva jati jnana, knowledge of the previous lives. Because the samskara has been produced by the experiences of the previous lives. Suppose a man, by very nature, is very short-tempered, let us say. That is his samskara. So by concentrating upon that samskara of that person, he is able to know what has happened in the previous life which has led to the cultivation of the samskara. Similarly, pratyayasya parachitta jnanam. He is able to concentrate his mind upon somebody else's mind. The power is there. For instance, Miss X is sitting here, let us say, and the yogi is here. He has been able to control his own mind and he has practiced samyama, he has mastered it. So he concentrates his mind upon the mind of that person. Automatically he knows what is contained in his mind. That is, reading the minds of other people. There was one Swami Vijayanandaji Maharaj. We used to call him Pashupati Maharaj. He was the person who built up the Buenos Aires Center in Argentina. He had come here when we were brahmacharis, and in the night class while talking to us, he told us he suddenly developed the power of knowing the contents of the minds of other people. So for a few days he enjoyed it. As soon as he saw a person, he could know everything that was happening in his mind. Afterwards he found it became a terrible nuisance. He could not sit and think of Sri Ramakrishna. Then he wrote a letter to Mahapurush Maharaj. He was Mahapurush Maharaj's disciple. Mahapurush Maharaj wrote him a letter. As soon as this postcard reaches your hand, this power will disappear. And he got the postcard, he read it, immediately the power left him. So that means such powers are there and they are very, very true. Pratyayasya parachitta jnanam. Then there is another very interesting power. Kaya rupa samyamat tad grakhya shakti stambhe chakshuh prakasha asamprayoge antardhanam. Now, the yogi is sitting here. Something is coming out of his body. And others are able to see his body. There is the object called body, and something is coming out. Let us say rays of light are coming out, and the other person who is sitting there is able to receive those rays of light, and therefore is able to see this person. But if the yogi practices samyama upon his own body, he is able to control the light waves that are going out of his body. They are just withdrawn. So if that happens, then others cannot see him, antardhana. That is what the sutra means. Chakshuh prakasha asamprayoge antardhyanam. I think I have told you about this. It happened here once. One of our devotees, a disciple of Yatishwanji, suddenly brought a photographer one day at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon without informing him. He was so free, went straight into his room and said, I have brought the photographer, will you please come and pose for a photograph. Then Maharaj started laughing. Oh, you want my photograph? Is it? All right, let me see. He came out, all the while he was smiling, and then sat there in the visitors' room where I normally sit and receive all of you. He sat there on a chair, and that gentleman was an expert photographer. He took about 4 snaps, and then afterwards when he went home and developed them, all the 4 were absolutely blank. Nothing was there. Then he was very much upset. What is this? My camera is all right, film is all right, and I have taken it all right. How is it that it has not come? Then he came back to Maharaj and then confessed what had happened. Then Maharaj simply laughed and said, now you take it, it will come. And the very next photograph was perfect. So automatically he had many of these powers, but he never revealed them during his lifetime. So though we were so close to him and so intimate with him, we never knew that he had all these powers, because he used to take words from other people not to reveal these things until after his passing away. So what Patanjali has mentioned here actually has happened in this case. Sopakramam nirupakramam cha karma tat samyamad aparanta jnana arishtebhyo va, and so on. Then there are other powers which can be developed by the yogi by practicing samyama. Baleshu hasti baladini, for instance. By practicing samyama on the strength of an elephant, he himself becomes so strong as an elephant. Bhuvana jnanam surye samyamat. By practicing samyama on the sun, he is able to get a knowledge of the 14 worlds, and so on. Kshutpipasa nivrittihi kantakupa. By practicing samyama on this spot near the throat, he will be able to conquer hunger and thirst. And by concentrating in between the eyebrows, he will be able to get a vision of the Siddhas, the great perfected people of the previous generations. So after describing all these things, Patanjali gives a warning. te samadha upasargaha vyutthane siddhayaha. The purpose of yoga, purpose of concentration, the purpose of samyama is kaivalya, realizing God and getting muktiya, moksha, liberation. Before liberation is attained, if the yogi misuses this power, then they prove to be obstacles in the practice of yoga. Not only he will lose those powers, he will also be in greater darkness, greater ignorance. Te samadhu upasargaha vyutthane siddhayaha. The waking state, they may be siddhis, but when you try to practice samadhi on God, on the Atman, they become obstacles. They take the mind away from God. Sri Ramakrishna also gives a warning. He explains it through a very nice story. A yogi practiced for 12 years the art of walking on water, and he wanted to exhibit before other people how he was able to walk on water. And then another person paid 1 anna to the boatman and crossed it and told him to his face, the siddhi that you have got after 12 years of tapas is worth only 1 anna. What you have achieved, I have also achieved. So there is no meaning in wasting one's life and time and energy in these siddhis. Ultimately, what we want in life and what Yoga Shastra is telling us is to control the mind, concentrate it on the Atman, and ultimately feel the presence of the Lord or the Atman within and get out of this bondage of samsara. As far as the philosophy is concerned, Yoga and Sankhya are identical, the 24 cosmic principles. But Yoga Shastra has added one more called Ishvara. Sankhya philosophy does not accept Ishvara. It says Prakriti itself, by the very presence of the Purushas or the individual souls, evolves into this world. But Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or the Yoga Shastra says, no, Prakriti by itself cannot evolve. It is because of Ishvara, who is the Nimitta Karana. He is the efficient cause. It is he who creates the world according to the karmas of the individual souls using Prakriti. And here, for the existence of Ishvara, Patanjali's Yoga Shastra gives some proofs. As far as the things which cannot be seen through the Panchendriyas are concerned, we have to depend upon the Shastra Vakya. This is what Shankara says. Atindriya Vishayas can be known only through the Shastras, because the Shastras are authoritative words of great men of realization. They have realized them, they have given it for the guidance of the future generation. And this Ishvara is Sarvajna and Sarvashakta, all-knowing, omniscient. And the Srishti, the creation of the world, comes because of Ishvara. Ishvara is the Lord who creates the world using Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti, the material cause, evolves into this world, evolves into the bodies. And each Purusha or individual soul is put into the respective bodies depending upon the type of karma he has done. So this is how the Yoga Shastra or Yoga philosophy puts it. And the purpose of yoga is Kaivalya. Kaivalya is a special word used by Yoga Shastra. Kevalatva. The individual soul is entirely by himself. No association with Prakriti under any circumstance. That state is called as Kaivalya. In the beginning, in the state of bondage, the individual soul, Purusha, is associated with Prakriti through this body-mind complex. He thinks it belongs to him or he is identified with him. That is called Ajnana according to Vedanta. But gradually, by the practice of yoga, he gets what is called Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati. So, Purusha is different, I am the Purusha, and Prakriti is different, I am different from that, I have nothing to do with it. This idea gradually matures into realization by the practice of yoga, by the practice of the 8 steps given by yoga. Ultimately, it results in Khyati, it is also called Viveka Khyati, actual realization of one's Atman nature. Once that comes, the soul is entirely established in himself. That is called Kaivalya. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. The very beginning Patanjali says, when the mind is, or when all the vibrations of the mind are completely controlled, then there is nothing to disturb the Purusha. He is withdrawn into himself, established in himself. The drashta, the seer, the Atman, he is established in his own swarupa, in his own true or real nature. So even according to the Yoga Shastra, Jivan Mukti is the goal of life. It can be done even while we are living in this body. Once we are able to realize that, then we may continue for some more time because of the prarabdha karma, and during that period, after realization and before the body falls, that person is called Jivan Mukta, and the type of life that he leads is entirely different. And Yoga Shastra, though it doesn't give the details of a Mukta Purusha's life, we can substitute from other sources like the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads. Ashariram va vasantam na priya priyes prishataha. Once he experiences that he has no body, is free from body-mind complex, is the pure spirit, then the experiences of happiness and misery of this world cannot touch him. Adhyatma yogadhigamena devam matva dhiraha harshashokau jahati. So a dhira, a wise man, a man of knowledge, a man of renunciation, he practices Adhyatma Yoga, withdraws the mind from outside and fixes it upon the Atman inside. So when he does that, he is able to realize Deva, the divinity within him, and once that realization comes, there is no question of harsha and shoka. Neither happiness nor misery of this world can touch him anymore. Manapamanau yavetau priti udvegakarau nrinam taveva viparitarthau yoginaha siddhikarakau. Manapamanau yavetau taveva ahuhu vishamrite apamanau amritam tatra manastu vishamam visham. The Markandeya Purana is telling that generally in this world people experience mana and apamana. Somebody honors us, somebody abuses us. Our mind is affected. But as far as the yogi is concerned, his mind is not at all affected. Tulya ninda stitir mauni santushto yena kenachit. It's not at all, it doesn't affect his mind in any way. But the same thing can be made as a sadhana also. That is what the Markandeya Purana is telling.